us Hillary Clinton in Iowa.
I wanted to invite someone that is going to make sure that I and every other young person in this country has the brightest future possible. And that is why I invited Hillary Clinton. You know, my principal said something very powerful last week. He said, all too often, big politicians forget about the little guy. And in this case, he was talking about small towns and small schools like what we have here. And Hillary Clinton is paying attention to the little guy today. And, I mean, that's amazing. And really, I just think that's the kind of person that Hillary is. You know, she goes around and she listens to the problems of the American people, and she wants to help solve them. And that's why I'm proud to support Hillary Clinton. I am proud to be her youngest precinct captain at the caucus here in Keota. And I am proud to say that she has my vote in my very first election. So, Keota High School, it is an honor for us to introduce to you former First Lady, former Senator, and former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton.
That was terrific. Thank you so much. Megan, thank you. Kylie, thank you. Taylor, thank you so much. Wow, I'll tell you, that's just an incredible introduction, but I have to give you the story that's behind the scenes. I started seeing these young women showing up at my events, and they were holding signs inviting me to Keota. And I don't know how many times you did it, but you really made an impression on me. And one time after I finished an event, I was shaking hands, and they were there and said, would you come to our school? And I said, well, and they had a sign. I said, is your school in Keota? And they said, yes. I said, well, I'll try. You know, I mean, I don't want to make a promise I can't keep. So I said, well, I'll try. And then the next time I saw them, they were at another event, holding their signs, raising their hands, and as I was calling on them, I said, I'm really coming. I will come to Keota. Anybody who has worked as hard as you have, I'm coming. So, to Abby and Megan and Kylie and to your teacher, Skylar, because it takes a teacher to inspire this kind of activism by students. And I really applaud you for teaching. And to Mr. Carlson and all of the staff and faculty here at the school, and to so many of the parents and grandparents. I'm going to be a grandparent again, I have to tell you. It's like the best news for me, and it's the best club I've ever been in, and other residents of this area, thank you so much. And I'm delighted that my very good friends, Tom and Christy Vilsack, could be with me, because one of the things that I hope we can talk about today is what's happening in rural America and what can be done. And Tom, as many of you know, who served as your governor, is the Secretary of Agriculture and is doing so much to try to promote a diverse economy in rural America. And I think I'll give him a chance to say something about it. And Christy, who has been an educator for so many years, is now taking her expertise and working on behalf of education around the world with the Agency for International Development. So I'm thrilled both of them can be with me. I want to just make a few comments. First, I apologize for being late. Turns out we couldn't land in the airport here because of visibility, so we had to go elsewhere and drive. So please forgive me for being late. But what I wanted to do was to make a few comments and then to throw it open to any questions that anybody might have on any issues that might be on your mind. Let me start by saying that I think our country needs a president who can both get the economy working for everybody not just those at the top, and keep us safe and secure here at home and around the world, maintaining America's leadership, and getting our democracy, which is the most extraordinary human invention, to continue to work and promote freedom and opportunity for everyone. And that's a big order, but it's nothing that is out of reach if we have an election this time that really tries to set out the choices that Americans are going to be facing, starting right here in Iowa on February 1st with the caucus. Now, there are big differences between how I see what we need to do in our country and what you hear from the candidates who are running on the Republican side. And I think that's what an election should really be about. What are the differences? What are the values? What are the visions that we have? And how do we pull people together to achieve them? So just very quickly on the economy, I think that our economy works better when we have a Democrat in the White House. I think that it shows over many years that we have a history of lower unemployment, higher incomes, and you are 4 times more likely to have a recession when you have a Republican in the White House. Now, why is that? Well, I think in part it's because if you just go back and look the last 35 years, don't go back even further than that, we've had 5 presidents, 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats, and the Republicans have followed an economic policy that hasn't worked for the vast majority of Americans. And each of them left economic problems for their successors. Now, in my husband's case, he inherited a recession and a national debt that had been quadrupled in the last 12 years. And so he had to get to work, and at the end of his 8 years, we had seen the creation of 23 million new jobs. Incomes went up for everybody, not just those at the top. And we lifted more people out of poverty than at any time in recent history and ended up with a balanced budget and a surplus. Early on in his presidency, my husband was asked, what do you uniquely bring to Washington? And he thought for a minute and he said, arithmetic. You got to make it add up. And you have to do the right things in the budget and in making partnerships with business to really help people get ahead and stay ahead. Well, I joined the Senate in January of 2001. I was elected from New York, and I got there, and I was pretty excited because I thought, if we have a balanced budget and a surplus, that means we have some opportunity to do some really good work in America, really invest in education, really invest in research and science, extend the life of the Social Security Trust Fund and Medicare. I mean, we had some business we could do. Unfortunately, the incoming Republican administration went back to the same policies that, with all respect, don't work. Cut taxes on the wealthy, get out of the way of corporations, and see what happens. Well, we saw what happened. We had the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. After the 2008 election, President-elect Obama called and asked me to come to Chicago to meet with him, and I didn't know why. It turns out he wanted me to be Secretary of State, but before we got started, he said to me, it's so much worse than they told us. We were losing 800,000 jobs a month. 9 million Americans ended up losing their jobs, and 5 million homes were lost. And $13 trillion in family wealth was wiped out. People had to sell homes, cars, go into their retirement funds, their college funds, and most people haven't yet recovered from that. The economy has recovered. We've gotten back 13 million jobs, but most people haven't had an increase in their incomes, and most people are not as well off financially yet as they were before that happened to us. So we're going to have an election about what direction do we want to go with the economy. And I'll tell you what I want to do. I want to get incomes rising again. And that means we have to create more good-paying jobs. And I want to double down on infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, our tunnels, our airports, our ports. We should be rebuilding America. Not only will it put so many people to work, but it will also make us stronger economically. I want us to invest more in advanced manufacturing. I have a tax credit to try to get more businesses to do that. And you know what I've been inspired by? I've been inspired by what you've done here in Iowa when you combine combating climate change and moving toward clean energy with advanced manufacturing, and I'll tell you why. Your governor, when he was there, Tom Vilsack, and thankfully it's been followed in a bipartisan way in Iowa, began to invest more in wind power in Iowa. You now get 1/3 of your electricity from wind. You, Minnesota, and Texas have the highest percentages of getting 30% or slightly more of your electricity from a renewable source. I go around bragging on Iowa all the time because when I say to people, we're going to combat climate change and we're going to have more people working in clean renewable energy as we transition away from fossil fuels, I can see some folks are skeptical because that maybe is not what they've been told. And then I say, go look at Iowa and look at what's been accomplished here. And it's not just that you've got those turbines moving. It's also that you've taken your community colleges and you've invested in how you train people here to assemble and fix those turbines. Tom and I were at the Des Moines Area Community College together this summer, talking to the young people who are being trained to be machinists and tool and die makers because I was attracted wind turbine manufacturing, and that's advanced manufacturing. And Tom told me there are 8,800 parts in a wind turbine. Somebody's going to make them, somebody's going to install them, and somebody's going to repair them. And you now have more than 7,000 people in this state working in wind. So when you hear from the Republicans, as they like to say, you know, they don't believe in climate change, and when you ask them about it, they say, well, I'm not a scientist. For heaven's sakes, tell them to go talk to a scientist, because it's not only important for us to do this to protect our environment, but it's a great job creator. And I want us to be the 21st century clean energy superpower. And I want young people, like the young people who are here, to be as inspired by that as I was when President Kennedy said we were going to send a man to the moon and bring him back. A lot of people didn't think we could do that. And we did it faster than it was predicted. I want young people in our country to be thinking about all the ways that they can help us combat climate change through clean renewable energy. And I've set some big goals. I want us to have deployed 500 million solar panels by the end of my first term, and enough clean power electricity to power every home in America by the end of my second term. So we can do these things if we set some big goals, if we stop arguing with each other, pointing fingers with each other, insulting each other, and come together and work to meet some big goals. There's no limit to what we can do. I also want to do more for small business. My father was a small businessman. He had a little small business printing fabrics for draperies. And it made a good living for us. And I see how most of the new jobs in America will come from small business, but we're not doing enough to help small business. I want us to get back doing more to help create and expand small businesses. And I also want to raise the minimum wage, because if you work full-time, you should not still be in poverty. And you know, I believe in hard work. That's how I was raised. But I also believe in being rewarded for your hard work and not being taken advantage of and not being left further behind by the time you finish. So I want to raise that minimum wage. And one of the fastest ways that we can increase incomes in America is making sure that women get paid equally for their work. And you know, one of the reasons why this is still a problem is because under our laws, you can get fired or retaliated against if you ask or find out what somebody else is making where you're working. So we don't even really have good data, but we have a lot of anecdotal data. I met a young man in New Hampshire who said to me, "I want to tell you why I'm for you." I said, "Well, thank you." He said, "I got my first real job when I was 17. I was working as a cashier in the store where my mother worked." He said, "I was really proud because I'd never had a job like that before. So when I brought home my first paycheck, I showed it to my mom, and I saw her face fall. And I asked her what was wrong, and she said, 'They're paying you more than they're paying me, and I've been there 4 years.'" And I said to the young man, "How could that be?" And he said, "Well, I later found out, they basically said to me, we want young men like you in this store. We want you maybe to go into a program to become a manager." And the young man said, "They never offered that to my mother, never even raised it with her." So families are losing money that women should be entitled to bring home and add to the family's income. And that means the whole country is not doing as well as we should. I also want to see more businesses sharing profits with their employees. If you help to make a business profitable, the CEOs are not the only ones who should be benefiting. And we have to change our tax code, which is so tilted in favor of those on the top. And I'm going to do everything I can to institute what's called the Buffett rule. I was with Warren Buffett in Omaha last week. I was proud to have his endorsement because he's at least one person who understands it's not enough just for him to be successful financially. He wants everybody to do better, and he wants every millionaire to have to pay at least 30% income tax instead of escaping with 10% or nothing, and we're going to do everything we can to make that a reality. And there's a lot of other loopholes and funny tricks that corporations and millionaires can play in order to pay less. And we're going to go after all of that. I'm also going to do everything I can to defend education and to make it clear that the best way to improve elementary and secondary education is to actually listen to the teachers and educators who are in the classrooms with our students and not scapegoat them and treat them like they don't have any contribution to make. And I want to say a word about small rural schools like this one, because I know that was the original reason why you all got so excited and why you were stalking presidential candidates. And I don't blame you. And I actually looked up some numbers. Iowa has one of the best education systems in the country and has had for a long time. And I believe, since I grew up in Illinois, we used to take a test they called the Iowa Basic Test. We used to take that test all the time. I wasn't happy about it. But we did it because your education system was viewed as one of the best in the country. And your students have, I think, the second highest ACT scores in the country. And I looked at the average of what Iowa students have, which is higher than the national average. This school's students are higher than the Iowa average. And so, for the life of me, I don't understand why your state government, and I know Governor Branstad vetoed the money that would have come to help this school, and it was a bipartisan agreement. Those are hard to come by these days. You had a bipartisan agreement in your legislature for more one-time student funding to help deal with some of the financial challenges that districts like this one have, and Governor Branstad vetoed it. Yet at the same time, you have these laws which require if you have a deficit, you may not be able to be a school district. It doesn't make sense to me. When something is not broke, don't break it, right? And this school district and these schools throughout Iowa are doing a better than average job. Now, I wouldn't keep any school open that wasn't doing a better than average job. If a school's not doing a good job, then, that may not be good for the kids. But when you have a district that is doing a good job, it seems kind of counterproductive to impose financial burdens on it. So the federal government doesn't have a whole lot to do with this. This is mostly state and local decision making. Very little, less than 10%, I think maybe 7% or so of the money that is used to run schools in Iowa comes from the federal government. So therefore, this is primarily a state issue. But as president, what I'm looking for are schools that exceed expectations. And I don't care whether they're urban, suburban, or rural. And where there are small districts like this one, I know you've got online opportunities, and maybe there should be exploration about how you can also share teachers and all the rest of it. But I am very partial toward districts that are doing well. And from everything I can tell, this one is. And so I hope that you're able to work through whatever your financial and political challenges are with the state government and at least have a fighting chance to keep providing the quality of education that produces students like these three young women. I meet a lot of students, and you can be very proud of not only them, but I'm sure so many others, for the way they present themselves, the way they conduct themselves, and how effective they have been in making their case. So when we talk about rural development, you've got to also talk about rural education. And I think we've got to go hand in hand. And maybe Tom will have something more to say about this, because if we're going to diversify the rural economy, we want to make sure that we have the best possible schools in order to produce the students and the adults that are going to be part of that new economy, particularly when it comes to clean energy in Iowa. I also believe we need to do more on early childhood education. A lot of kids are not prepared when they come to school, and they never catch up. So I would like to see us try to help, starting with the most disadvantaged kids, to give them a better early head start, a better universal kindergarten experience so that they can be successful. And then on the other end, we've got to make college affordable, which it isn't right now for a lot of hardworking families. And I have a whole plan about how to do that. I want to make tuition debt-free so you don't have to borrow money if you go to a public college or a university. And I want to help anybody who has debt. Anybody here have student debt? Anybody here have some student debt? Yep. I want to help you refinance that debt the way you can a mortgage or a car payment. Right now you can't, and we ought to be able to get the cost down, and you can save thousands of dollars if we do that for you. And I personally don't think the federal government should be making money off of lending money to students and families for kids to go to college and get their education. So we're going to change a lot of what is now the kind of challenges that people face when it comes to getting enough funding to go to college. I also want to defend the Affordable Care Act because we now have 18 million people who are getting health care finally. And I want to do what I can to make it work better, get the costs down, and especially get prescription drug costs down because those are beginning to really go up again. And I will say I disagree with what I understand to be your governor's plan to privatize Medicaid. I worry about, I think it's 500,000 Iowans who are dependent on Medicaid, and a lot of people who have disabilities, who need chronic care, who are in nursing homes. And so I worry about what's going to happen to them when you shift to a for-profit model. It can be done in an appropriate way, but the way it's been done so far raises questions that I hope people will be trying to, what? Yeah. Well, I'm with you because I don't see why you should have to be put through that. So I'm hoping that this change either can be slowed down or altered in a way that doesn't create that kind of anxiety, because that's what people in Iowa have been telling me, what that young woman just said. And you are under a very tight timeline. Like, okay, tell us what doctors and everything you're going to use, and the information wasn't even available. And if you're responsible for your health, or more emotionally, as we could hear, responsible for your children's health, that's a terrible position to be put into. So I'm hoping that we don't see that happen. I also want to say that we need to do more, and later in Fairfield, I'm going to be talking about a plan I have to try to prevent and hopefully eventually cure Alzheimer's, because if the experts tell me, and I've talked with them, that if we put $2 billion a year into Alzheimer's research, in 10 years, we would know a lot more about it, we would have a lot more information, and we could maybe head off what's going to happen. We have 5 million people right now suffering from Alzheimer's. You multiply that by the families taking care of them. It's related, we now know, to Parkinson's and other what are called neurodegenerative diseases, and it's going to cost more and more money. Families' money, government money, Medicare money. So we need to make a big investment. It's the 6th leading cause of death right now, and we don't invest in it the way we do in heart disease, cancer, and other diseases that we have to try to cure and prevent. So I think we've got to do more on caregiving. We also have to make mental health problems get the same treatment as any other kind of health problems. And this is something that also I hear about all across the state. When somebody says anxiety, when somebody says depression, when somebody says bipolar, when somebody says, they're suffering and they can't get care, that's painful. And it's also very counterproductive and usually ends up being more costly. And then substance abuse. My very first trip to Iowa, from Davenport to Council Bluffs, I heard about substance abuse. And then I heard about it everywhere I went. And there's a very serious problem with addiction to opioids, the pain-killing drugs, that now people have moved from them to heroin. And we had more deaths by overdoses last year than we did by car crashes. This is just ripping families apart, and we're not even trying to make a difference in helping people the way we should. And it's also really expensive. I'll give you just a quick story. I was in Reno, Nevada, and they have opened up a facility starting with alcoholics. Now they're moving on to drug addicts. They try to get them off the streets and get them into a place where they can become sober, get off their addiction, do some work, get some help. And it's run by the sheriff's office and Catholic Charities. And the reason they did it is because they kept picking up the same people all the time, throwing them in jail, send them to the emergency room, and then they'd see them again in 30 days. And it just was a revolving door. So they went to people and they said, we won't send you to jail if you'll come to this facility. You have to live there. You have to be tested every day. We'll give you something to do. We'll give you counseling and support. So they got a lot of responses from people who said, nobody's ever asked to help me before. I went to visit it. The sheriff told me they've saved $4 million the first year. It's a lot cheaper to put somebody in a facility like that than in prison, in the emergency room, in hospital. So we got to think differently about how we deal with the problems folks have. Let me say a quick word about the importance of our national security right now. I've been speaking out about what we need to do to combat ISIS, to protect ourselves, and I've laid out a 3-point plan about how to deprive them of territory in the Middle East, how to disrupt and dismantle their global network of terrorism, and how to make our country safer. And there's a lot behind it about what we have to do to help. And I think it's a very serious challenge we face. And so with the first issue about how to deprive them of territory, that takes air support from the Americans and others. It also takes us working to build up the military capacity of the Iraqi army, of Sunnis and Kurds who will fight ISIS. There's a battle going on right now in a place called Ramadi, where the Iraqi army, with some American advisors and American air cover, is fighting to take it back from ISIS. We have to disrupt their global network of terrorism, and that means stopping foreign fighters, stopping foreign money, and fighting them on the internet, where they're very successful. And I've talked a lot about how our great tech companies need to help us on this. And they are. I mean, Twitter's taking down accounts, YouTube is taking off terrible videos, Facebook is looking at what is posted by these jihadists. So we will go after them. And here at home, we have to do a better job coordinating between federal, state, and local law enforcement. And we have to do a better job trying to disrupt their communications if we get any chance to do that. And that's another area that the tech companies need to be helping us with. But I think what you're hearing from some of the Republicans, most particularly Mr. Trump, about Muslims is not only dangerous, it's shameful. It is not the kind of language somebody running to be president of the United States should be using. And it has consequences. It has real consequences. You know, people around the world pay very close attention to our elections. And if you go on Arabic television, as we have, and you look at what is being blasted out with video of Mr. Trump being translated into Arabic, no Muslims coming to the United States, other kinds of derogatory, defamatory statements, it is playing into the hands of the violent jihadists. There is nothing they want more than to be able to claim that the United States is against Islam and against Muslims. And that then lights an even bigger fire for them to make their propaganda claims through social media and in other ways. It also does something else. Our first line of defense in our country has to be Muslim Americans who will work with law enforcement and report suspicious activity. And that's what we did in New York after 9/11. The New York Police Department developed those relationships because we were worried every single day about another attack, and a lot of effort went into preventing attacks and, you know, sometimes right in the nick of time. So if you have someone running for president who basically says to a group of Americans, I'm talking about Americans, we don't respect you, we don't want you, that creates an atmosphere that is not helpful as we go after anyone inside our own country who is planning or plotting against us. So it's a very serious matter when you hear some of the things that he and unfortunately some of the others have been saying. But I'm very confident in our law enforcement, our security forces, that they can do as much as is humanly possible to protect us. But they need help from the communities in which we all live. Final thing I want to say is that a lot of the positions that the Republican candidates are taking are very much at odds with where I think our country needs to go. I really believe that we've got to work harder together to find common ground. It's not easy. I know that. But it must be our highest priority. And I will go anywhere, anytime to meet with anyone to find common ground, to solve our problems. I will also stand my ground. That's what I've done as First Lady, as Senator, as Secretary of State. I worked with Republicans a lot. And maybe we only agreed on, a small patch of ground, but we worked hard to cultivate that, to try to make something positive happen. That's what I will do as president every single day. And let me just end by saying to you that I get up now thinking about what the future is going to be like for my granddaughter, and then starting later in 2016, what it will be like for the newest edition. But when I think about that, I am focused on not only doing everything I can for her, but also making sure that all of our kids and our grandkids have a chance to live up to their own God-given potential. it really does matter if that's how we feel about all of our children. I'm the granddaughter of a factory worker who came as an immigrant with his family, went to work in the Scranton Lace Mills in Scranton, Pennsylvania, worked really hard so that he could give his sons a better life, and he did. My mother had a very different experience. She was abandoned and neglected by her parents, sent to grandparents who didn't want her, and by the age of 14, she was working as a housemaid. And so I have seen our country through the eyes of my parents with their very different experiences. Both of them, despite their different upbringings, really loved this country and believed in its promise. Well, so do I. And it's not enough that that promise is available for the granddaughter of a former president and Secretary of State. It needs to be available for the granddaughters of factory workers and farmers and the grandsons of truck drivers and teachers. And that will be my mission as your president, every single day, to do everything I can to make that promise of America real. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you all. Well, you've been very patient, but I'd love to take some questions. Tom, do you want to add anything on the rural development work that you've been doing and that you helped me with in my campaign?
Sure. There are, I think, 4 opportunities for the next president, and Hillary is committed to this. Obviously, production agriculture continues to be the lifeblood of rural areas, and we want to obviously support opportunities in markets for our farmers, but we need to complement that with local and regional food systems that allow smaller producers access to local markets so that they're in a position to set their own price and allow those smaller farmsteads to remain profitable. We obviously want to promote conservation and the opportunities that it creates for more outdoor recreation and ecosystem markets. But the real big opportunity, and the one that Hillary is very supportive of, is the bio-based economy, the ability to take our farm products and the waste product from our farm products and convert them into new energy and fuel sources. We know a lot about that in Iowa. She's a strong proponent of the renewable fuel standard, which is important to me and important to farmers here, but it's important to the country. So when you combine those 4 opportunities, production agriculture, local and regional food systems, conservation and outdoor recreation, and the bio-based economy, you have the opportunity to create jobs, manufacturing jobs, higher profits for farmers, and it will help create that vibrancy for small communities that will allow granddaughters and grandsons and sons and daughters to be able to have the opportunity to continue to live in places like Keota. And that's a goal that I share with Hillary, and I'm convinced she is committed to it. She will be a president that cares about rural America and it will not forget about it.
Thank you. Thanks. Now, anybody have a question? Okay, this young man right here.
Okay,
here comes a microphone.
Oh, thanks. Okay, I hope I can do this. Thank you. It's so awesome to be with you. Before my question, I just want to say that if girls want to run the world, we should give a few more minutes for bathroom breaks at the debates.
I'm just glad they had one somewhere.
Yes. Yes, I'm glad you got back. But being here at a high school with graduating seniors and others with college on the mind, I feel asking this is important. I'm currently a freshman at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, so I'm fortunate to have Scott Walker as my governor. The only good news is with him not running for president, there's one less clown in the clown car. On a serious note, though, I'm going somewhere. He has signed a bill that cuts almost $300 million from the UW system. My school in particular is taking the largest hit. We have a population with 40% first-generation college students, and it is the most diverse school in Wisconsin. A tuition freeze has been enacted, so what, if anything, could the federal government do to help struggling universities under Republican leadership like Scott Walker or Bruce Rauner?
Well, look, I think this is not just a problem in some states. I think it's a problem everywhere. And, some states have gone further and made deeper cuts, and I know that Governor Walker has also cut a lot of the scholarship aid, a lot of the low-interest lending aid that Wisconsin used to provide for students. I just think this is a very counterproductive approach, because part of what we had is the greatest higher education, public higher education system in the world, and states were part of that. And we still have, I think, the greatest of those institutions, but we're making it so difficult for people to afford to attend them that doesn't add up, doesn't make sense. So under my New College Compact, the federal government would match money that states would begin to put back into higher education so that we could really try to get the scholarship money up, the work-study money up, so that kids who were there could afford to stay there. And I worry that the colleges themselves are not doing enough. I think that tuition has gone up 40%, some of it because of cutbacks from states. States diverted money to highways, and particularly prison. The prison construction that we have done over the last 20 years has been very costly, and it's mostly been done at the state level. So I think colleges also have to take a hard look at, what are the costs that they are passing on to students and families. And I think families have to make a contribution, but not beyond their means. That terrible application form that some of you may be looking at now, the FAFSA form, which is just impossible to fill out and doesn't give you really what you need. I think you can just get rid of that, and you could have like a one-page online application. And if families' incomes were below a certain level, they would not have to contribute to the college tuition, but they would have to obviously contribute to living expenses and other costs. And then I think students, this is where I differ with my friends on the Democratic side. They've advocated for free college for everybody. And I do not believe that we should be paying for Donald Trump's kids to go to college. I think we should be paying for middle-class, working families, kids who are poor, who want to get ahead. And I don't think we cannot afford to pay free college for everybody. But we can have debt-free college so that you don't have to borrow much or at all. And that's what I want to see us do. But I do want students to contribute. Maybe it's because I worked. I worked through college. I worked through law school. My husband did as well. We think kids should work. And if you work 10 hours a week, that's a contribution which we think students should make. Because we believe, and I think there's evidence of that, something you work for is going to be more meaningful to you. So there's a lot of ways that we can begin to get the costs down for students and families, but the states have to be part of it. And I will work very hard in a state where if a governor doesn't want to, I'll work directly with the institutions to try to give them the support so that they can make it affordable. Let's see. I see a hand right there. Yes, that young man. Just a minute. Here comes a microphone, so I think you should be able. Okay. We have a microphone for the young man right here in the. There we go.
What are you going to do about border control?
I believe in strong border control, and I have voted for strong border control as a senator. And we have spent a lot of money in the last 10, 12 years strengthening border control. I think border control has to be part of comprehensive immigration reform. Where I part company with some of my counterparts on the Republican side is that I think we should provide a path forward for the people who are already here, the 11 million people who are here and their families and their kids, and at the same time continue to tighten up border control. And it's not just on our southern border. We have to tighten up control in our airports. I was very pleased that the Congress took steps to tighten up what's called the visa waiver system and to tighten up the process of getting a visa to come into our country. And those folks primarily come through airports. They're not crossing the border, they're flying in. And we've got to have tougher border security in our airports as well as on our southern border. And we also have to work with our Canadian friends to make sure we have suitable border security on our northern border. You know, most of the students here would not remember this, but, you know, a very alert border guard up near Seattle caught a guy in 2000 on his way to try to, you know, commit a terrorist act in LA. So we got to be tough on our borders. I am absolutely committed to that. But at the same time, we need to be doing comprehensive immigration reform, and that's how I would proceed as president. Yes, right there. This young woman right there. If you talk to it, it'll, yeah. Don't worry.
Hi. On a similar note, my name is Elise Gingrich. I'm part of a group called Friends of Pastor Max. You have seen me before. ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, has a reputation.
Can you just slow down a little bit? I'm having a hard time. I want to hear you, so just slow down a little.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement has a reputation for deporting people who are not on the priority list, such as Pastor Max Villatoro from Iowa City, and also has a reputation for mistreating women and children who are in detention centers run by private companies. So I'm wondering what you would do to hold ICE more accountable and also to possibly bring back people who were unjustly deported from the United States.
Well, first of all, let me say that I agree with you that we should end private prisons and private detention centers. I think that they have become how can I say this? They actually have beds to fill in order to make money, so they want to be sure that people are picked up to fill those beds. I don't think that's the way we should be running detention centers. And a lot of the private prisons are equally suspect on that count. I also believe that we should have better facilities for family detention for women and children, and I would, certainly advocate for that. And I think we need to use more discretion in who we deport. Violent criminals, goodbye as soon as we can get them out. People who are, maybe had a misdemeanor 20 years ago, I think we need to have a slightly different approach. And I know about the gentleman that you mentioned. A lot of the people in the community that he was in for all those years have stood up and advocated for him. So I think we do need to be more careful about deporting quickly the people we need to get out of the country and being more thoughtful about people who are not risks or security risks to us. But that's why we need to move toward comprehensive immigration reform, so we pull everybody out of the shadows and we register them all. And if they do have a criminal record that is a significant criminal record, they should be deported. If they do not, or if they have a very minor offense or two, then I don't think that we should. But I think that they have to be registered, they have to pay taxes, they have to be, given the chance to, be on a path that would lead eventually to citizenship, and that's the position I've had for, the last many years. I voted for the immigration reform bill in 2007, and I'm going to keep working to try to get that accomplished. Okay, let me walk over here. Here, you stand up, I'll hold this for you.
All right. With all the recent shootings lately all around the country, what is your position on gun control?
It's a really important question. I bet you know, but I'm not sure everybody knows, 90 people a day are killed by guns. That's homicides, suicides, and terrible accidents. And some of the accidents are just heartbreaking. The toddler who finds the loaded gun under the bed, or the kid who's just fooling around with his friend and has never been given, the right attitude or belief about handling guns. Terrible accidents. So that adds up to 33,000 people a year. And I think we have to have common sense gun safety measures. And I support comprehensive background checks, closing the gun show loophole, closing the online loophole, closing what's called the Charleston loophole. The Charleston loophole is the loophole that was put into the Brady bill, background check bill, which said that, if you go to buy a gun, the seller only has 3 business days before he has to sell it to you while they're trying to run the check. The young man in Charleston went in for the gun, and he came back after 3 days, and they hadn't finished the check. If they had been able to finish it, they would have gotten the information from the county that was being put into the computer system, which said he wasn't eligible to buy a gun. He had a felony record. He took that gun, and he went to the Bible study in that church and murdered 9 people who had invited him in to be part of their Bible study. And he sat there, and then he killed them. Now, I know that there's a huge debate about this, but if you look at where our country really is, 92% of Americans believe in that comprehensive background check and closing those loopholes. And in fact, 85% of gun owners believe that. And yet, members of Congress and legislators and others just do whatever the gun lobby tells them to do. And I would love to see responsible gun owners stand up and say, you don't represent me anymore. We're going to form our own group, our own organization, because we have guns because of, hunting or sports shooting or collection. They're part of our tradition. My father taught me how to shoot. I've been hunting, but always with really responsible people. And I think we have got to call a halt to this. And it is heartbreaking that we're still having these mass shootings. I mean, the numbers of people who are murdered every day, and then during the course of a week or a month, should get us all to say, wait a minute, we've got to do something about this. And we can do it consistent with the Constitution. So I am going to keep fighting for it, and I will do what I can to end the absolute immunity from liability that the Congress voted. I voted against it. Basically, gun manufacturers and sellers are the only business in America that you cannot sue for anything. They are totally free from liability. And let me just give you 2 examples. Remember the guy who went into the movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, and just started shooting and murdered all those people? Well, he murdered this young woman, and her parents, went to the trial, tried to understand what had happened, got the information, and realized that he'd bought all this ammunition online where people selling it had no idea who he was. He could have been a terrorist. They didn't know. He turned out to be a different kind of murderer. So they sued the online website where he got his ammunition. Not only was the case thrown out because there's absolute immunity, this poor grieving family was asked to pay the legal bills of the NRA that had defended the website. I mean, just think about that. And then the worst thing is just after San Bernardino, people said to the Congress, wait a minute, we know you're not going to go as far as we would like you to go, but at least make it prohibited so that no one who is on the no-fly list for potential terrorists can buy a gun in America. I mean, we have information that terrorists basically say to one another, don't worry about getting a gun in America, that's easy. Don't worry about that. So, okay, at least give the information about who's on that list so that law enforcement can try to prohibit them from buying a gun. And the Republicans in Congress said, no, we're not even going to do that. So we are in a very difficult period here because I don't know all the reasons why all these murders are happening. I don't understand all the motivation. Clearly, some people are gang members. That's what a lot of the shooting in some of our big cities turns out to be. Some are mentally ill. That's another one of the problems we have. But I had a woman who works with, remember Columbine, the murder in the high school? Those two boys, they lived in intact homes. They went to church. They looked like ordinary kids, and then they plotted this massacre of their fellow students. And I met a woman in Colorado whose father was one of the teachers who was murdered. And the way she deals with her grief is that she got a degree in social work and psychology, and she works with offenders because she's trying to understand what goes through somebody's mind, what makes them do this. And she said, I want you to remember something. She told me, she said, I was working with a man who was in a fight with his wife, and the police came, and it was broken up, and he served some time in jail. And she said, I was talking to him, and he said, I never understood before. He said, but if I'd had a gun that day, I would have murdered her. I just had no control over how I was feeling. So everybody needs to take a deep breath here and try to figure out what we're going to do. And I will continue to speak out about this, because when you lose 33,000 people, there's got to be something more we can do than just send our thoughts and prayers when more are murdered. That just isn't something that I think we can live with. So. All right, I know we've got one more. Okay. Yes, this young woman right here. Yeah.
What are you going to do about all this bullying? Not just because of just people who want to be mean, but mental and physical and diseases that people have that they're able to live with every day.
Can you tell me a little bit more about why that's on your mind?
I have asthma. And occasionally I've heard people talking behind my back about not wanting to be near me because I have asthma. I mean, people, it's not contagious. It's not going to.
That was really brave. Bullying has always been around, but it seems to have gotten somehow easier and more widespread because of social media and the internet. People can say something about somebody without having to look them in the eye or see them walk by. And so I think we all need to be aware of the pain and the real anguish that bullying can cause. And sometimes it's because of a condition like asthma, or how many of you have ever read the wonder stories about the boy with the terrible facial deformity? Have you read that? And you know what? You've read that? I heard about this. What an incredible book. It's mostly for kids, 11 to 15 or something, but it tells you the story from the point of view of somebody who has a very disfigured face that he was born with. And he's had countless operations, and he still has a very odd, unattractive look. But his parents have loved him, and his big sister has tolerated him, and he has some friends, and he talks about what it's like to be looked at like that. And it's a great lesson for anybody, no matter what our age, about how words can hurt and how bullying somebody can make them really feel left out and in despair, and can cause some terrible things sometimes to happen. So I guess in school, what I would hope is that people would protect each other from that and speak out against it if it happens, because I don't think a lot of people who do it really understand how it makes other people feel. So you're standing up and saying that, I think, is important. And I think parents should be, asking their own kids, hey, is everybody treating you okay? And are you being kind to everybody else? And I want to end with two points about this, because we do have more awareness of bullying, so you can go online and you can hear from people about what they've done to try to not get upset about it and how to try to talk to people who might be acting that way. So we have more resources than we've ever had before to try to protect people. But as I say, the internet makes it really hard because you can say something nasty about somebody. And look, you are looking at somebody who's had a lot of terrible things said about me, and I am well aware of the fact that it's really easy to do that, and you just say it and you send it around the world. And luckily I'm old enough that it doesn't particularly bother me, but I can't even imagine what it's like to be, a young person in today's world where that's coming at you all the time. So I do think we all have to speak up and speak out about trying to create an atmosphere where bullying is not appropriate, where it's not, allowed, where people don't buy into it. And the other thing I want to say is this, and especially because, we're in Christmas week, and I hope all of you have a wonderful Christmas with your family and those who are close to you. And I've said this a couple of times in this election recently, and I know it's sort of odd coming from a person running for president, but I really do think we need more love and kindness in our country. I think we are not treating each other with the respect and the and the care that we should show toward each other. And that's why it's important to stand up to bullies wherever they are, and why we shouldn't let anybody bully his way into the presidency. Because that is not who we are as Americans. And so let me end by saying Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, everybody. I hope you'll come caucus on February 1st.
Folks, that was the Hillary Clinton rally there in Iowa. Just wrapping up there in Iowa. We are going to take you to another live event that is already happening. Ted Cruz has his own town hall rally going on right now. Let's get you out there live right here on Fox 10 News Now.